Federal Communications Commission is considering a new rule that could change the way pay TV channels are distributed in the United States. FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler calls the proposal Unlock the Box.
Consumers will finally have options for how they access pay TV, and those competitive options will do what competition always does: drive better services, drive down costs, and create opportunities.
But a broad coalition of TV operators and content creators oppose the measure, saying it'll actually slow down innovation, jeopardize consumer privacy, and drive up costs.
You're talking about a massive development effort at great cost and time and expense, and you're telling us that we're the ones who bear the cost and have to recover it from consumers.
There is one thing that almost all the major players agree on, though. There's plenty of room for improvement in the pay TV space.
Here I sit in front of my TV at night, and it's still the same crappy guide where I have to press 1,000 buttons to drill down in the menu to get the one thing I want.
Coming up on LPX, the battle for the future of pay television in the United States. Should we unlock the box, or should we eliminate it? Welcome to LPX. I'm Brad Linder. There are a lot of people in America who hate their cable boxes.
For so many years, the cable box was awful. To this day, so many are awful. The Verizon box, you try to punch in some channel numbers, it may take several seconds before it catches up. You know, I used to call the Time Warner box like the steampunk DVR, like the retro future. It was just so awful.
Dave Zatz is a technology blogger who's been watching the TV and digital media space for over a decade.
Most of the stuff out there is slow. It's being now burdened with advertising. The video on demand is now, there's commercials throughout it that you can't skip. I'd say the experience that the cable provider is offering in many cases is compromised. It's not ideal.
For years, federal regulators have been trying to change things by pushing TV providers to make their content available on third-party hardware. The idea is to let you watch TV from companies like Comcast, Dish Network, or Verizon Fios without using the box that those companies rent out to you month after month. It's been slow going. In the 1990s, the FCC enacted rules to pave the way for Cable Card, a system that theoretically allows you to watch cable TV on a third-party box like a TiVo, but it was costly to develop, has some serious limitations, and was never very widely adopted. In 2010, the FCC considered an updated solution called AllVid, but ultimately the agency abandoned it because, among other things, it would have required consumers to put another box in their homes. Now, FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler is spearheading another push, and this time he calls it Unlock the Box.
Today's set-top box marketplace has closed standards controlled by the pay TV industry. We propose to establish open standards for set-top boxes, the same way that we have open standards for cell phones, for routers, for other devices. And we hope that by removing those barriers, innovators will step up to develop new ways for consumers to enjoy their favorite programming on their terms.
Wheeler made his statement following a vote by the FCC to seek public comment on new rules for expanding consumers' video navigation choices. The hope is that one day, instead of renting a set-top box from your TV provider, you'll be able to get all of your channels through a third-party device like a Roku, Apple TV, or Amazon Fire TV, and that you'd be able to use whatever user interface was designed for that hardware, instead of the user interface built by your TV provider. Think Verizon's system takes too long to switch channels? Try TiVo's user interface instead. Don't like Comcast's program guide? Maybe Apple TV will have a better one. Or maybe some company that's not currently operating in the space at all will come along with something new and revolutionary. At least that's one idea. But TV providers see things differently. Paul Glist is an attorney representing the National Cable and Telecommunications Association. He says there are serious financial consequences to forcing TV providers to make their content available without also sending along the program guide listings and other information. When a company like Comcast, Time Warner, or DirecTV negotiate with programmers, they don't just discuss a flat fee for carrying a TV channel.
They license it typically with an arrangement on advertising, what's acceptable, who gets what share of it. And they license it with protections for the security and the branding. Some of that protection gets down to issues like, where do I appear in the channel lineup so that my audience can find me? How am I marketed? If you have a search, make sure that you don't pull me up next to X-rated programming. So there are a lot of terms and conditions in the licenses that protect the brand and finance the video.
Glist says there are also concerns that the rules don't currently prevent selling user data or stripping out advertisements and replacing them with other ads. FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler says the final rules would be written in a way to prevent that, but TV providers remain skeptical. So those providers, which are also known as multi-channel video programming distributors, or MVPDs, are not big fans of unlocking the box. But they do have another idea: eliminate the box. Gliss says MVPDs are already working to make their content available on a wide range of platforms while maintaining control over the user interface.
Right now, if you pull up your tablet or your smartphone, you're going to find all of the top 10 MVPD apps ready to go. You're going to find Netflix. You're going to find Amazon. You're going to find Hulu. They're all there side by side. And there's a browser on there for anything that hasn't written its own app. And they are all available to you on the same device. And the device can differentiate itself with its own top-level menu, all of the experiences that are offered today.
And he's not just talking about smartphones and tablets either.
You can search your Time Warner Cable and your Netflix and your other apps from a unified search in Roku, but there is an arrangement so that Roku is not prioritizing their own programming at the top or hiding the fact that the consumer already has that movie for free from their subscription to cable. And all of that is worked out through licensing and apps.
But right now, that Roku-Time Warner partnership is the exception and not the rule. And initially, it's only available as a trial in the New York City area. While Gliss says market forces are driving TV providers to make apps available for devices like Roku boxes or smart TVs, it's all voluntary, and it all still leaves those content providers very much in control of the user interface. But Brad Love wants to let TV viewers choose their own experience. Love is senior software engineer at Hauppauge, a company that makes TV tuners and video capture devices for computers. He co-wrote a proposal for a virtual head-end solution that was submitted to the FCC. It would allow you to walk into a store, buy any compatible hardware, and then bring it home and use it as your cable box.
Plug it into your home network. It sends out a discovery message. It says, hey, is there any virtual head-ends on my home network? If there is a virtual head-end on your network, it responds back, hey, I'm here. And then at that point, you can negotiate for the 3 flows of information from it, and that's it.
By the way, those 3 flows of information, the first is information about content that's available, which includes channel listings and video-on-demand content. The second is what you can do with that content. For example, can it be recorded for later viewing? And the third is the actual content itself, the videos. Love says the virtual head-end solution is easy for both consumers and content providers, and it can be rolled out as a software update, so you don't even need to buy new hardware. Your existing Chromecast or Roku device could theoretically become a cable box.
It's been stated multiple times the proposal cannot be done in real life. Well, me and another engineer from Google, we sat down and we developed this exact proposal 3 different ways using OTA signals with some software I wrote, and then a cable card device, and then Google Fiber. And we did this over the course of a week or 2 to have a full turnkey implementation of this proposal. So as far as difficulty in implementation, re-architecting of networks, this whole thing was designed to be easy to plug in.
To be clear, you would still have to pay your TV provider a monthly fee to receive channels. But under this virtual head-end solution, you might not need to pay to rent a set-top box every month. You could just use an app on your smart TV, Roku, or Amazon Fire TV. TV providers, or MVPDs, say they're fine with losing the cable box rental fees. They want to eliminate the box, remember? They just don't believe that things will be as simple as Brad Love says. National Cable and Telecommunications Association attorney Paul Gliss says the industry spent $1 billion to implement the unpopular cable card standard, and he could see that happening again with the Unlock the Box proposal.
You're talking about a massive development effort at great cost and time and expense, and you're telling us that we're the ones who bear the cost and have to recover it from consumers, whether they want an all-vid retail device or not. They have to pay for all of this development.
By the way, I've noticed opponents of Unlock the Box like to refer to it as all-vid, associating it with a similar proposal that was not adopted in 2010. Anyway, Gliss says the new proposal would also be hard to implement without adding another box to the mix. And even Brad Love agrees that while cable customers could probably just use their cable modems to send TV signals to third-party devices, customers that get internet and cable from separate sources might still need some sort of extra hardware just to get the TV signal into the house. For example, if you have cable for internet and satellite for your television service. And Gliss also says requiring TV providers to unbundle the content from the user interface could slow the pace of innovation and prevent subscribers from getting some of the features they might actually like about their current experience.
It strips out the guide, but it strips out a lot more. It strips out the apps, and it names them. news headlines, weather information, sports scores, social networking. All of that is unnecessary. Don't even bother sending it. It strips out the search tools. It strips out things like Comcast has an award-winning talking guide for the visually impaired. That's gone.
Bliss says there are also security concerns and privacy concerns.
Right now, if you take a subscription from a cable provider, you have certain guaranteed federal privacy rights. That cable operator is highly restricted in what they can do with any information that they have about you. And they have to tell you exactly what they're going to do. They have to give you certain options. And even if the government wants to pry into your private viewing records, they can't do it without going to court and letting the consumer appear and defend. That's gone. And so are the protections of marketing to children in ways that are against the law. That is gone.
FCC Chairman Tom Wheeler says there will be privacy protections in place, but the proposal suggests it'll be up to TV providers to find ways to include them in the information stream, and not up to companies like Roku or Apple to figure out how to enable them. Still, Wheeler says the overall goal of the Unlock the Box initiative is simple.
Nothing in this item requires consumers to stop using the system they have right now. It only creates the opportunity for them to have choice. There is no multi-billion-dollar re-engineering of cable systems, as we've heard. It takes the same product that goes through the cable system and the cable box today with the same structures and moves it through a different box requiring the same structures. As a result, existing copyrights and programming agreements are unaffected. Consumer privacy is protected. Emergency alerts are passed through, and child protection laws are unaffected. And nothing in this proposal slows down or stops cable innovation.
The FCC approved the Unlock the Box proposal on February 18th by a vote of 3-2. A public comment period runs through mid-April, and then the proposal suggests that the measure could be fully adopted in a couple of years, although that seems highly optimistic. Ajit Pai is one of the two commissioners who voted against the measure.
The defining characteristic of this proceeding has been vigorous disagreement, with video distributors and content creators on one side, and the consumer electronics industry on the other. Second, there's a problem of timing. The Commission's rules will not have any impact for years. The notice proposes that MVPDs would not have to implement these regulations until 2 years after their adoption. So even if all goes according to plan, and I think reasonable minds could doubt that it will, consumers probably wouldn't feel the effects for another 3 years.
Attorney Paul Glist says if the FCC does move forward with the proposal, groups representing TV providers will certainly pursue legal action against it. So it could be years before the rule's actually adopted, if it's adopted at all. And by then, the TV landscape could be a very different place. Joining me to examine the Unlock the Box and Eliminate the Box camps a little more closely are my friends Dave Zatz and Mari Silby. Dave is a technology blogger who writes at zatsnotfunny.com, and Mari is senior editor for cable and video at lightreading.com. Mari acknowledges that the cable card system did end up costing the industry a lot of money, and that the new system could be expensive too.
I am very sympathetic in terms of retrofitting the hardware piece. That's where I am sympathetic to the operator channel. Where I'm less sympathetic is to the idea of once we are talking about everything in software, then the question is, should they be forced to provide APIs that give a lot of the information about what they're delivering so that third parties can create other user interfaces around that? And that, I think, is the long-term question that's a lot more interesting than the set-top box question.
So really the difference between Unlock the Box, which is Tom Wheeler's name for it, and Eliminate the Box, which is sort of the industry phrase that they're trying to replace that with, is both of them are software-based approaches ultimately, but one is the operators still have control over how the content is arranged and distributed. And that's the Eliminate the Box solution, where it's just sort of an app-based version of exactly what they're already doing.
Right. And I have, so the apps, they're really trying right now. The operators are really trying right now to actually put these apps out there. It's darn slow going, but they're trying to put essentially all of their content distribution out via these apps so that you could, in theory, access them on a Roku box or on an Amazon Fire or whatever. And they've had different levels of success, and there's been different levels of enthusiasm around that. And, maybe if they had done that at this point already, maybe if they'd done it very quickly and proactively and made a lot of people happy by just saying, hey, go pick up your Roku box and you can get literally any pay TV operator's service on that box. If they had done that quickly and effectively, maybe we wouldn't even be having this issue because people would be happy enough. They're upgrading their guides, but they haven't. And because they haven't, I feel like there's a whole other conversation now to be had about like, well, you guys aren't doing this really well. So maybe we should let some other folks in there to do this.
Right. And I think there are two things that cable did to bring this onto themselves. Number one, the piss poor support of cable card over the years. And then, I think Comcast always being so slow to authenticate HBO Go on all these different retail devices kind of brought this to the forefront. There was a lot of negative press. And that's not exactly the scenario we're talking about, but it talks to kind of the attitude of the provider and how they take it upon themselves to determine what we're going to watch on what device. When we consumers should have some say in sort of what device we want to use. Not just from the cost perspective, but from the experience.
And a lot of these things, it's not even just about the Roku or about the Apple TV anymore. It's also about your phone or your tablet. I think a lot of cable providers are now making it possible to interact with their content on an iPad, right?
Yeah, the thing that cracks me up is they gave up essentially really early as far as iOS and Android were concerned. Most of the big guys have some kind of mobile app to varying degrees of functionality, I think, and varying degrees of what content you could access. But they opened up to those platforms a lot faster than they have to any kind of connected TV platforms.
Which, because they're making money off of set tops and things like Roku are competitors.
And I can't help but I've been a cord cutter for the last 10 years. So it's kind of funny that I'm sitting here talking to you guys about cable and satellite because I use Netflix and Hulu and YouTube and Amazon Prime. And, I'm paying $16 a month basically, except for I'm paying a lot for cable already, or for the cable internet already. But then if I wanted to, I could also now subscribe to Showtime. I could subscribe to HBO. I could subscribe to CBS. I could subscribe to all sorts of different things and get additional content that normally you would have needed the cable subscription for. Is this all going to be moot in a couple of years because so many of these content providers are just sort of going their own way?
This whole concept of the skinny bundle has come into effect because we got so bloated cost-wise. But in terms of the programmers potentially all going direct, I think this is going to work for a short period of time where somebody like you, Brad, can go through and pick out, I want this skinny bundle and this HBO Now and this whatever. And you can probably make it work, and you can probably make it work cheaper than a big fat cable bundle that had more than you wanted. But, it's the same thing that happened with video on demand. As soon as people actually start doing those things, then the industry has to find a way to monetize it. So for video on demand, they've made it so you can't skip through commercials. And the point is they're going to make their money one way or the other. Both the programmers and the operators are going to make their money one way or the other.
Also remember, most of these cable companies are also your internet provider. So if you stop buying TV from them, they're just going to hit you with broadband bandwidth caps. So, like Mari said, they're going to get paid. They're the incumbents. By the same token, though, this is actually an opportunity for them. They're pushing back, but it's an opportunity for them to keep their customers and keep their customers happy. If we all want to watch TV on our Roku or on some device that isn't invented yet, it behooves them to make it as easy as possible for us to get the content we want the way we want it. So we'll keep paying them for it.
We started this conversation because you said, I have so many thoughts on this topic. I need to do a podcast. And I said, hey, I have a podcast. So what got you so sort of up in arms about this, or so worked up about this in the first place?
Well, like Amari alluded to, there are so many angles and permutations to what's going on here. Cable card technically worked. Commercially, absolute failure. Even for TiVo. TiVo is not what I'd call a big success in the retail space. Obviously, those of us like myself who own it are very pleased being able to take your cable content and put this unique framework around it, which is superior to most cable interfaces, and you can do a variety of things. And then there's the whole angle, be careful what you ask for. From the TiVo side of things, they're saying, commercials shouldn't be removed. So TiVo allows commercial skipping. Is that feature going to be now prohibited?
Let's talk about TiVo a little bit more specifically here. I mean, this is one of the early innovators on disrupting the traditional television model, right? Like back in the 90s, I think it was, they basically were the first ones to come around with a digital video recorder. Up until that point, you could use a VHS. You could record your shows and time shift them and maybe fast forward through the commercials, but it didn't really scale very well. You could only record a few shows on a tape, and everything was sort of... So TiVo came along and really changed things, and they helped invent this space. But they also, in the last 10 years or so, have had a really hard time making their case, because what they want is for people to pay on top of what they're already paying the cable company to get this extra service. And people say, well, I could just get that from my cable company. So it's a really tough sell. And it's, they've had a hard time sort of continuing to make that case. Whereas when they started, there was nobody else doing it. I mean, it was them and Replay TV, but they sort of won that war.
What I love on the TiVo front is the fact that, the operators continually now point to TiVo to say, look, we've got, there is innovation. This is happening. You don't need to make further rules, whatever. But TiVo never would have, the next TiVo cannot exist if we don't do something to potentially change the way the system is. Whether or not the next TiVo should exist is a whole different question. But I love that they always point back to TiVo. And, TiVo, again, is walking such a fine line, because they want to argue based on their history, but they're making a lot of money from the operators.
Mari's called them the frenemies of the cable industry.
Forever, for a very long time.
Yeah. So, but also to what you're saying, Brad, how, no one wants to pay, the $15 to TiVo when you're already paying all this money to the cable company. That's actually one of the arguments about Unlock the Box, that whatever comes next should be cheaper to produce. TiVo has a lot of this dedicated MPEG-2 hardware. They got to have their own PCMCI slot for this cable card, which is 30-year-old technology and therefore very expensive because no one else is using it. So, whatever network device that ingests video in this next thing should be cheaper. When you look at someone like Tableau, they pull in over-the-air content, and their guide data fee is something trivial versus TiVo's $15 for what they're calling guide data, but also subsidizes their hardware and whatever else it does.
And so the other thing that you were talking about earlier, I think, about TiVo that's really interesting here is, okay, so they're the ones that are using cable card, which was the sort of precursor to all of this. But what they're doing also is, in a lot of ways, exactly what everybody's worried is going to happen next, or what everybody on the operator side is worried is going to happen next, which is they're packaging it their own way. And so what does that mean for TiVo? If this goes through and now suddenly they have access to the unlocked box, but they can't do business the way they've been doing it.
Right. That's what I was saying. Be careful what you ask for. I mean, they may lose some of the capabilities they currently had. They just introduced this skip mode to hop over commercials. They're not really removing them, but what does remove mean? Is skipping equivalent to removing? And they sell metrics on viewership, which in this proposal, it says you're not going to sell this data. They also have some stipulations in there about, how you handle children's programming. And I'm not sure TiVo does anything unique in that area. Maybe now there's going to be a burden on them to do something more. There's
another interesting piece too, which is not only is TiVo kind of walking a fine line, but all of the over-the-top providers, so Netflix and Hulu and whatever, the other arguments the operators are making is saying, hey, you want us to open up our services so that people can build experiences around that, but you're not saying the same thing, at least in this ruling, you're not including the Netflixes and Hulus and Amazons of the world. So they don't have to open up their services. But now you're saying, hey, as operators, even if we're delivering it over IP, we have to open it up and they don't. So why is that? And that's another, this sounds like it's great for the over the top innovators, but they could very easily get themselves dragged into this as well if they have to open up their services to other third parties.
I'm going to try to say this without laughing, but so what you're saying is, if somebody wants a Roku and they want to use that as the cable box, they can. But if somebody prefers the Comcast cable box,
it could happen.
There's no rule that says the Comcast cable box will have access to be able to run Amazon Prime and Netflix and all the other things.
Right now, none of the big operators, their user guides and all of that doesn't, and for very good reason, doesn't include Netflix and Amazon and all of those services in their search and discovery, in their channel lineups, and any of that stuff. None of that information is available through the same interface, which really is what consumers want, ideally, would be to have everything I'm paying for, I should be able to find it in one place and click a button and there you go.
Isn't that what Google TV was supposed to do?
It's what so many people were supposed to do. So Apple was supposed to do this, right? Like it was, this was the holy grail. But just the same way that Comcast doesn't want to open up their stuff, I'm sure Netflix, and they make very specific deals to open up their information to third parties, whether it's hardware or whether it's software and, apps and such. And they're making those deals based on business decisions and business negotiations. If they suddenly were forced to, just as a matter of principle and a matter of law, that would probably change a lot of their equations.
If Time Warner wanted to put out an Android-based TV box, could they just do that and just include all of the Android versions of the apps, or would that have a licensing problem?
Boy, I'd have to think through that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't imagine them wanting to do it, but
No, not at all.
Yeah.
Well, isn't Time Warner doing a trial in New York City right now where they are giving out Rokus and you get your channel lineup or a subset of your lineup through that Roku? So they've kind of already started going down this path without requiring federal intervention, which I think is what some of the cable operators are saying. They're saying, we are innovating. We are giving you some choices. Mari's shaking her head. You can't see it, but she's shaking her head.
Well, they are, but they're doing it so slowly. I mean, there's a couple of them that have done, a reasonably good job. Time Warner is one of the few that has made its content available on lots of different platforms, but most of them haven't. And even Comcast saying that it's doing it and starting to do it now, it's very, very limited availability, very select markets, et cetera, to get, access to their new Stream app, for example. So it's, it's great that you're innovating, but this should have been here several years back by now.
Okay, but let's fast forward 5 years. Okay, because it could take 5 or 7 years for any of this to come to fruition. The cable industry says 7 years. So let's knock 2 years off of that and just call it 5. But let's say we get to that point. What if Roku says, I don't want to build a TV app, just use the app they're giving you? I mean, what if no one builds anything? I mean, that's where we are right now, where you got Silicon Dust and TiVo, vying for these small scraps of a small business. What if by the time this is all said and done, no one wants to build anything anyways? I don't know.
That's a very good point. The only thing I would say to that is there may be other stuff that they could then bundle into this. So we think of it as just the user interface. But if you if you're Amazon maybe, and you bundle in the user interface, but that somehow connects to, I don't know, how you order your Tide, I have no idea, but somehow connects, there's some kind of integrated app thing where you're not just talking about your television entertainment anymore and they're bundling it with something else. Maybe there's a future there, but it is a very good point. Like how many companies are going to want to get into the business of just creating a television software experience? I don't know.
So another thing that I've been hearing a lot are sort of issues of diversity in programming and how this could affect that. What's that about?
So again, this is about how third parties might try to monetize content. The programmers, including sort of smaller niche and independent programmers, make deals. There are various laws, but they also make deals with operators in terms of carriage, in terms of what their content is actually worth. And if there's other people who are making money off of their content in different ways, then the operators aren't going to want to pay them as much money to license their content. And if the operators aren't going to want to pay them as much money, or it's not even just pay them as much money, but even be willing to carry them because it's just not worth it to them, then they lose distribution. And the way they argue it, they have a hard enough time getting distribution anyway, because you're, by their nature, talking about a niche and minority audience of some kind. So that's the argument. Again, my counter to that is if you make rules around how it can be monetized, then in theory, you can potentially get around some of this. It's, I wouldn't want to be the one making those rules either, but it seems like that's something you could do.
Right. And I think that's one of the criticisms that we've seen from the industry, which is, oh, you wave your hand and you say there have to be rules, but we haven't seen the rules. And of course, we're still early in the process here, but how do you make those rules airtight, right?
Right. And, probably you make the rules and then somebody tries to find a loophole and then you have to seal that loophole, and that's the way it goes.
There's a lot of unknowns here, and, especially in regards to the niche programming and, will they like Mari said, lose some of their distribution opportunities. I think we just don't know. And I can see why certain content providers would be frightened. I mean, it makes sense.
What do each of you want to see happen? In a perfect world, what happens next?
In my perfect world, first of all, the operators make good on all their promises, and they do create all these phenomenal apps that you can access on any internet connected device. So that happens really quickly. And by the end of 2016, no matter what pay TV provider you get, you can access all their content and their entire service over whatever you want. That would be great. So that happens first. But then the second thing is you do get to say to a third party, hey, I'm going to take the data from Comcast, and I'm going to take the data from Netflix, and I'm going to take the data from all of these guys, and I'm going to make, the greatest consumer interface that exists that really does make it easy to get whatever you pay for in one place. And again, I think you make rules around that. You try to do as much protection as you can in terms of how things get monetized. But if you really want to make it better for the consumer, then that's how you go about doing it.
So I'm gonna say there's no point in any of this. I'm gonna say 5 years ago, this is what was needed when cable was not supporting cable card. The FCC had to get involved. This is what had to happen. It didn't happen. The environment is different now. People are cutting the cord. If the cable companies want to retain video customers, they're going to make a better experience. And I think Comcast is starting to do that with X1. Certainly Dish with the Hopper is a very compelling solution. You got built-in Sling box. You got 16 tuners. I think the market can drive this. I think the government is too slow. I think cable is going to make them slow down just because that's their nature. They want to control this. So I think we're going to spend years and years working on this. And I don't know that we're going to be in a better place when we're done.
You're probably right.
I think the cable operators are going to do what they need to do to keep their customers from cutting cable. And we're going to get the skinnier bundles. We're going to get better offerings. We're going to get more Roku apps. Comcast has already put that stake in the ground and said, we're going to make a Roku app.
But maybe just this process is going to speed up that process. Just the fact that we've gotten government involved to say, look, something needs to change. Maybe, I do think that's a lot of what's pushing these guys to say, okay, maybe, hey, yeah, apps, great. let's make those available everywhere.
Mari Silby is senior editor for cable and video at lightreading.com. Mari, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
And Dave Zatz is blogger at Zatz Not Funny. Dave, thanks for being here.
Thanks, Brad. Thanks, Mari.
The initial public comment period for the Unlock the Box proposal ends in mid-March, and the deadline for replies is mid-April. If you want to read the full proposal or find information about how you can submit a comment, you can find links at lpxshow.com. And while you're there, you can find details about past episodes, links to follow the show on Twitter, Facebook, and Google+, and other ways to follow the LPX Show. You can sign up for our newsletter or subscribe in iTunes or the podcast app of your choice. And make sure to leave a review if you like the show. You can also hit the contact button at lpxshow.com if you have ideas for future episodes. Special thanks to Dave Zatz for suggesting the topic for this show. You can find Dave's thoughts on TV, digital media, and anything else that he's currently obsessed with at zatsnotfunny.com. And you can find Mari's work at lightreading.com. I'm Brad Linder. Thanks for listening.